notes anyway, I think, as far as saying, I've had this for breakfast. I'm on this medication. I've had, this to drink or not drink. But I think that a lot of times that, that's if you're really out kind of on an expedition, you should be very sure of knowing what type of foods you're drinking and things like that. And, stuff like that, because, one of the things that happens is that, people start to assume that, you can go out and have 3 or 4 beers and then be kind of credible witnesses. Now, if you're out and, if you've out, camping and you've had a few beers and things like that, then, that's okay. And you see a Bigfoot, that happens, but, don't be on your expedition,
Well, this is so, we've made a big deal over the last couple of years about this whole idea of the citizen scientist that's doing good works. And
I've lost.
Are you there?
Yeah, I've got you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a poor connection signal from you. But anyway, what I was saying is there's no denying the fact that it is an amateur effort. And so what you're talking about to me is just the product of that, people doing the best they can without any training, without any help, if
Right.
that makes sense. And in fact, almost a refusal of help. So when I look at, say, like some of the reports and stuff, it does kind of make me twitch, and I have to be patient because as a trained debriefer, there is a very methodical way of debriefing somebody on an event. You deal with timelines, you deal with basic interrogatives. If you're worth your weight as a debriefer, then you've talked to,
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do, Patrick, if you can hear me, is I'm going to go ahead and play music, and I'm going to call you on your phone, because this Skype connection thing is not really working.
Very occupational
specialty,
and there's not a lot of understanding of how to exploit a site on things like expeditions, controls, and what you're looking for, and that type of stuff. So if I were to go into that side, I can't, I have to kind of pick and choose, what am I going to do? I would love to work with some of those guys as far as improving their debriefing techniques of witnesses. And there's also a saying too of sensitizing the witnesses on what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, hey, when this happens, so if you are going out on an expedition, as silly as it says, as it sounds, telling somebody, hey, if you happen to see this, try and get a reference point on a tree or something like that, or simple things like that, so that you can follow up. But that's if you want to approach this from a purely evidence collection, purely scientific, or the best facsimile we can of it. I mean, there's a lot of people that just want to go out and have the Bigfoot experience as well. So those people kind of drive the science guys nuts because they don't really put any effort into trying to prove anything to anybody. They're just out there doing it for their own enjoyment.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting because, but at the same time, they're out there not trying to prove it, but at the same time, they're posting lots of videos about the experience, and so I think that's one of those things that are kind of is kind of interesting, is that sometimes people will post videos about their experience and without any reference points, and so a lot of times people will say, well, how do I know that this is actually something that's true? And so I mean, it's a tough story. I mean, it's one of those things where from a standpoint of that, a lot of people can have Bigfoot stories, but whether anybody's going to actually take them and look at them as far as what they are, I always tell people, hey, you know what? I've got great Bigfoot stories. I've got great big campfire stories, and we can sit around a campfire and talk about them. except for the one time I was told to, that, can you come up to this place and do this, and document what you said. And so whenever I did go, I noted everything from front to back so that, if anybody said later, well, could it be this or could it be that, that somebody else could evaluate it and say, well, it could be this type of thing. So, the phenomenon that I experienced could at least be addressed by somebody else and say, hey, it's because of the EMF. It's because of, you ate these kind of, fruit or whatever, And so, especially whenever you're trying to back somebody else's claims up, I mean, you've got to be in one of those situations where you've got to be sort of ultra careful about, the type of materials that you're ingesting and everything else, and how much sleep you're getting, and because for a lot of reasons, if you're out in the woods for 4 days, just on this, you're in the Army. I mean, if you're out in the field for 4 days and you haven't slept, you can see things, and you can start to hallucinate and things like that. So, but it's an interesting point. So
yeah, it's just basic intelligence, human intelligence debriefing techniques, and again, you have to be patient. And as odd as it sounds, it's kind of interesting. I decided early on in studying this that I wasn't really going to go that route, as far as being an investigator.
Right.
I was pretty influenced pretty early on that these are some sort of intelligent, probably more sapien than gorilla type of a situation. Mm-hmm. And that's just a judgment call I made based on reading and hearing sightings and my own little research. So for me, it's more of an anthropology study. And so how you would go about an anthropology study where you have to build rapport,
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you, Patrick, Patrick, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look up. Will you message me your phone number now? And I'm going to play some music, and I'm going to make a real quick switch over to you, okay? On your cell phone. Would that be better?
I'll be honest with you. I don't really think it's on my side.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I've got I have no issues on my end. I've got a ton of stuff running through the other end of it. Let me go ahead and do this there. If we want to try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it, but I just redid the router and everything like that. The routers all are good. Well, we're going to try that though and see if that works. Because I'm not getting any kind of a signal failure or anything from my point. I'm looking at the speed router, the speed router tester. The upload to speed is excellent. So anyway, like I said, it's one of those things.
So where I was trying to go with this is I mean, we were kind of dwelling on the scientific method of evidence collection. And what I had kind of decided is that I think if you go about it that way, if they are more of a sapien, a thinking hominid than more of something that would be considered on the animal scale, then you have to build up rapport with this item, unlike an animal. In an animal, you habituate. You either make them feel safe, or around you, make them feel comfortable around you. Maybe you give them some food, and they view you as a food source, and they come around. But if they were more of a people, that wouldn't necessarily work. So you've got to build up a rapport with a people, with an intelligence being. So I approached it more as like what I think my view is more of an anthropology study rather than like a hardcore evidence collection type of activity. Maybe it'll work for me, but maybe it won't. Again, that's why we compare notes. And that's why we need to have a good collegiate relationship with all researchers. So whichever approach works, we can communicate.
Right. So how often do you go out and start to do research? I mean, I've obviously you've got this to do as far as the the computer itself, doing all the work as far as updating the website and everything like that. And then you've also got to try to go out in the field and how often do you get out in the now you live quite a bit away from the beaten path anyway, but how often do you get out farther than all that?
Well, I go up to the Greenwater area.
Yeah.
Are you still getting me?
Yeah, no, I'm losing you on my end. You're still hearing me?
Yeah, I can kind of tell when you cut out. So I go up there. It's about an hour away. I try to get out at least once a week, if not a couple times a week. The area is only really open May to about October though, and then the snows come in and they close the gates. So it's kind of a seasonal activity for me. And again, like I said, I kind of have a base camp up there, fairly deep into the forest, and just been trying to build up a rapport. I don't really do the food gifting that we used to do. I think that serves its purpose as maybe an icebreaker, but pretty quickly you realize that it's mostly animals that are actually eating it, and as an evidence collection platform, it's problematic. But I have I'll put out little communication tables, so little flat rocks, and put up figurines and see if I can't interact with them on some level.
Right. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to invoke a response from a fairly intelligent being then. In other words, you're not just trying to stick something, there to see if it's moved around. You're actually trying to hope that they engage in the process of looking at an item and changing it around as far as, do you try different, I know some people use glyphs or some kind of a marking to show that, and then other times they come back and it's changed to a different thing. Is that something that you do, or do you use toys, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of the above. A couple of years ago, I did have a pretty elaborate glyph that was left for me where I normally put my cot. It's still there, actually. And last year I was putting out various glyphs based on the recommendations of Brian Bland and Thomas Cantrell, what they think, are some universal signals, and they were changed. I go out in the woods and I try and go fairly deep, not because I necessarily think it's necessary. I think they'll come to you if they want to, if they're interested and it's something they want to do, they'll come to wherever you're at. But I do it to try and take away the human variable as much as possible. So when you're doing something like a communication table, so last year I put up a series of figurines of the evolution of man, and a couple of them were broken and snapped, and one was knocked off, and then the other two, the Neanderthal and the modern human, were left in place. That was kind of interesting. If you go to the YouTube channel for the Bigfoot portal, you'll find kind of a night of squatching with Patrick Eqistemon. You can kind of see what I'm doing on there. So that was really interesting that they snapped them off the bases and stacked them. So there's things like that you do. So that's kind of why I go kind of deep in the forest. It's an area that is known for a lot of sightings. And it's an area where I can kind of go deep enough to get away from people to, if you're going to run those type of experiments or run those type of things, you can, to the best you can, take out the variable that it's people messing with you.
Right. So is your location where you go to, is that something where you kind of research that with a group of other people, or is that one just specifically for you? Or
there's other people up in the green. There's lots of people looking at Sasquatch up in the Greenwater area, and we all take a little bit different approach to it, and we all know each other and we compare notes, but there's no denying that we're doing different things. And that's kind of one reason why I enjoy that community of people up there, is because, again, everybody's willing to agree